All right, welcome you on into a Friday Locked On Syracuse podcast. Lots to talk about. Obviously, the Wake Forest game coming up this weekend, but as expected, Jim Boeheim made some headlines last night during his coach's show. We were kind of waiting for that, knowing that something was going to come out of that. So lots to get to. He talked about next year's roster and how the freshmen all are going to play, and 2 or 3 of them are going to start most likely, which seems kind of bullish, but we'll discuss that on today's podcast. We'll talk about how he said he didn't call out Jesse post-game, some other things that were noteworthy from the Boeheim show, and we will preview Wake Forest. That's all coming up on the pod today.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, guys. Welcome on in. Thank you for making us your first listen every single weekday. Tim Leonard and Tyler Aki, happy to be with you guys here as we are the only place for daily SU pod. Subscribe to the show if you haven't already. You can also follow the show on Twitter at LO_Syracuse. And let's begin, Ty, by jumping into the coach's show last night. And I guess the first thing, the most important thing, or the most noteworthy thing to me was him speculating, Jim Boeheim, on next year's roster. And it was during the Q Sports Talk Q&A section, which is just a funny thing to watch as a consumer because it's Matt Park looking over at his laptop and then siphoning through these chat comments, and half of them are like Jimmy stinks, or people just venting out their frustration. And I don't think Coach can see them because really it's just Park looking over and then relaying what it is to Coach Boeheim. And I don't know, just the whole process was very funny to watch. But he did get asked about next year's class, and he said, I expect all 5 of them to play. And I think he said something like, barring something going haywire, all 5 will play. And then he said 2 to 3 of our incoming freshmen, 2 or 3, I think he said, will start, probably. So he left it a little bit open to maybe things will change, but I did not expect him to come out and say anything close to that anyways. And I think we're probably both in agreement that that's in the category of we'll see it, or we'll believe it when we see it, right?
Right. Took the words out of my mouth right there. I think I wouldn't be surprised if one of them starts. I really wouldn't, just based on what could be out, what could be back, just the outlook of next year's roster. But I'd imagine that there will be transfers brought in too. And the transfers will have a leg up on starting over the freshmen if that were to be the case next season and transfers are brought in. So that's why I'm still on the fence with it. Like, I also don't think all 5 will play too. Like, I just quite frankly don't think all 5 will be ready. I mean, look at some of these guys and where they're ranked, and look at some of the guys then and where, like, Kadari was a top 100 guy. Bryson Goodine was a top 100 guy, and they could barely sniff the floor. What's Peter Carey supposed to do if Frank Anselm's back and if Jesse Edwards is back? Like, you're going to play 3 centers, Jim? I don't think so. I mean, what's going to happen there? So I'll believe it when I see it. I'm with you.
Yeah, the thing that I think is less likely is all 5 playing versus a couple starting. Because if you go through the hypothetical roster, and Jim did it last night, and it's also sort of pointless to do it because it's not going to line up like this. Like, It makes sense in our head right now, but it would have made sense last year, and then it all crashed and burned. So he said, we've got Joe and Symir, and we've got Frank and Jesse. They'll play. And he said something like, and I expect Benny to be back, obviously, and he'll play. And then he added the 5 freshmen. He said, that's 10 guys already without even doing anything. So you're not going to play 10 guys, Jim. So if all 5 of those...
Nor should you. Like, we're not necessarily advocating to play 10 guys either. We want to see the best version of the roster on the floor.
I guess in his head, does he think that by throwing Peter Carey out there for an exhibition game, that means he's going to play, or by throwing one of the other freshmen? Like, we're not going to see a rotation of 10 guys once it comes to ACC play. And also, I would say this, we might not see all 5 of those guys come back. I mean, Frank feels like a total what if right now. I don't really see why he would if I'm him. Joe Girard, he probably should come back because this is probably the best situation for him. Symir, I think, is going to be healthy for this Wake game, which is a positive. That was another takeaway from the coach's show, and he probably will be back. He's been playing pretty well. Jesse, it's in the category of Quincy last year where everything makes sense that Jesse should come back. He has starter minutes, but this is a new era in college basketball, and something crazy could happen. I mean, Joe could leave, Jesse could leave. I'm not saying they will, but it just feels sort of foolish to do this exercise when we're not even in February yet.
No, I totally agree with you. Projecting the roster, and again, you're probably going to have a couple of bodies come in too. That's just the way it works. And do I think Joe's going to leave? Absolutely not. This is as cushy of a situation as he could ask for, really. I mean, the leash is long. He gets his shots. He's friends with a bunch of the guys on the team, including the coach's sons. So why would you leave? I don't think Joe would leave. Jesse, I don't think would leave. But again, it's the same thing as Quincy. If we were doing this show a year ago, we would have said, oh, yeah, Quincy's either going to be in the NBA or he's going to be back. We didn't think there was anything in between, but there certainly has been an in-between with him.
Yeah, and we got a tweet earlier in the week trying to project the starting lineup. I could do it right now. I feel like Joe Girard and what?
It's a fool's errand at this point.
It's a fool's errand, yeah. We'll definitely do it in the offseason. I'll put it that way. When we're doing podcasts during the offseason, there's going to be plenty of time to talk about that. And there's also going to be plenty of time to rehash all the transfer portal craziness that's going on because it's going to happen again. It might not be quite as crazy, but, guys are going to leave that we're not expecting, and they're probably going to add guys. But I will say, this is why I advocated for a 5-person class, and this is why I think the coaching staff was pretty steadfast on trying to get numbers in this class, because I'm not saying all 5 of these freshmen are going to play, but if those 5 guys come back and it kind of goes according to plan right now, and Jimmy or Cole are not coming back, which they both have Jim Boeheim hinted that Jimmy might come back. Cole Swider was talking to Jordan Capozzi on the Q Sports Talk yesterday and said he's at least considering coming back. So it's possible. It doesn't seem like Buddy's coming back based on recent comments. But if those guys don't come back, then I could see Chris Bunch starting as the other forward opposite Benny. I could see Justin Taylor maybe finding his way into the starting lineup as the guard opposite Joe Girard, and Symir's the guard off the bench. There's a path to those guys starting. I don't know if that's that great, though. I mean, I don't think that roster of starting 2 freshmen and having Joe Girard out there is going to make an NCAA tournament, sadly. I think you got to add in the transfer portal.
Right. Does it inspire confidence? That's the thing to me. And I think another thing, you texted me about this last night and we talked about it with Jeff Goodman, would you be surprised if Jim Boeheim stepped down after this year? And I think both you and I, after hearing some of the comments from Jim Boeheim, we're in January right now. Yeah. And he's already full steams ahead into next year, planning everything out for next year. I mean, he realizes what point in the season this is. He realizes the fan frustration. And I'm also glad, I think he went on Stephen Fonte and Paulie Sebelia's show, kind of holding himself accountable for it, saying the fans have every right in the world to be angry right now. We're not a good team. We're not winning games. Fans should be upset. And I'm cool with that. I like that out of Jim Boeheim. But to realize that at this point in the season and be already 1 foot into next season already, it seems like he's coming back next year. This is not going to be a step down season.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was a big takeaway for me. We'll dive into that more in just a second, but I want to tell you guys about an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. My listeners are earning cash back for every gallon of gas every single time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play. Use promo code SCORE for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first fill up, cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free. Use promo code SCORE for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a year in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back gets added right to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code SCORE to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. That's code SCORE on the Get Upside app. I do feel like you hit it on the head there. All the talk yesterday about next year's team, and he was just straight up asked about it in some instances. So it's not like he brought it up on his own doing, but I think a lot of the fans are already starting to think about it more than they would in a normal season. So it's coming up. It didn't strike me as a guy that's considering, just calling it after this year. And
Right.
I've gone really back and forth on that because there's been press conferences where it feels like he's way more calm and not defeated. That's not the right word, but just times where he's not himself almost in the press conferences and sort of admitting that, this team's not that good in a weird way and saying stuff like, yeah, we played pretty good this year, but it's a tough league, whatever. It's just not been his usual self in the press conference. And I felt, man, he might be done after this year. He doesn't look like himself. But then he brings up the stuff about Jimmy maybe coming back that makes you think he's coming back. And then this press conference to me was sort of subtly proof that he's not considering retiring anytime soon.
Well, the way I kind of interpreted it is he's gearing up for one last ride. That's kind of the way I see it. He's like, all right, this year's a lost cause. And I kind of see the writing on the wall that things aren't as good as we're used to here at Syracuse. But we're going to come back with a vengeance next season, and then I'm done. Then I'm out. That's kind of the way I looked at it. And again, I only read it. I only read the quotes on Twitter. I only read the things that you texted me that he said. I didn't actually hear it. So maybe it's different. If you got a different vibe from that perspective, I don't know. But the way that I kind of interpreted it is this is gearing up for one last ride. Next year is going to be it. And I can set the succession plan, all that stuff.
Maybe, yeah. It's hard to say on that because it's not like he can talk about 2 years from now. So I don't know. It's sort of tough because he didn't bring this up on his own and the questions were asked to him and then he just answered them. Like questions were asked about Kadary and Joe last year and he answered them again and sort of rehashed the same conversation he's had on that topic, which still hurts every time he goes into why Kadary isn't coming back and tries to make the case that he didn't choose one or the other when he never gave him a chance to start, which feels like sort of a shot considering, I don't know, Joe's not that much better than Kadary, and a lot of people would say Kadary's that much better than Joe, if anything, but we don't have to rehash that conversation again. He has taken sort of an interesting route this week, I feel like, in his media calls and everything, and he keeps going back to recruiting a lot, and I feel like that's his subtle way of saying, look, the players just aren't that good on this year's team, and he's realized that, and he's realized that this more falls on recruiting, which I'm with him. Is it more he's coached bad in the season or he just didn't recruit well? I think it's definitely more he didn't recruit the talent needed for the 2-3 zone and a good roster that has a diverse skill set. It's kind of just a lot of the same guys out there, a lot of shooters that aren't very good defenders.
No, yeah, I think you're right. This season has come down to more of recruiting than X's and O's because, I mean, we've seen him try some things this year to try to maximize. It's not like he's not trying out there to get the most out of this team. I do think he's certainly doing that. But when you look at, okay, the personnel, like we're used to seeing a Syracuse team with 4 or 5 athletes out there. You're hard pressed to find 1 to 2 on most personnel groups that go out there and the 5 on the floor. So yeah, it certainly comes down to recruiting, and he's acknowledged that. That's on him. He needed to recruit better. He didn't have the athletes to run the system that he wants. And I think if he had to do it again, there's some names that he would leave off, and there's some names that he would probably wish he still had on this team if he had to do it all over again. But it's certainly a tough thing because, like, I get it from his standpoint too. Like, he's been here 45 plus years. He deserves the right to coach his 2 sons. And his 2 sons are 2 of the least athletic players on the roster right now. They're part of the problem why the defense isn't working. But at the same time, like, you built up all this goodwill over 45 years. Like, you should be given that opportunity to coach your sons, no doubt.
Yeah, and I think his 2 sons would maybe work on a team that was surrounded by good pieces.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the issue is more that they need to be 2 of the better players. And Buddy is capable of that on the offensive end, but at the same time, you'd probably rather him be a 2, even that. Or
like if he had a Trevor Cooney at the top with him, or even a Frank Howard or Tyus Battle at the top with him, I think it works all right. as long as there's a couple of other guys behind him that can play in the 2-3 zone pretty efficiently. But it works when you're the odd man out from an athleticism standpoint. If you had Jimmy out there, if you have Buddy out there, it works when they're the odd man out in terms of defensive prowess and them being the ones that are a couple steps behind from an athleticism standpoint. But when you're out there and it's, I mean, you talked about it with Devo. We've got a lot of guys who are all the same pretty much out there. Dead-eye shooters and can't move very well on the defensive side of the ball. It's a problem. And that's what you're looking at in the mirror right now.
Yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't say Trevor Cooney. I'd just say if he had Kadari Richmond. Like, I know that just sticks the knife in more, but he'd be perfect. He could drive, he can get in the lane. He's kind of everything that they're missing on this year's roster, sadly. I don't think he's some NBA player down the road like some people think, and he's only playing 20-something minutes at Seton Hall, but he's shown flashes, and he was very good in the time that we saw him last year. So, I don't know. It's a bummer, obviously, that we don't have him. Last thing on the coaches show, he got in sort of a heated discussion with the caller about Jesse and saying that he did not call him out post-game. I'll say this. It wasn't like the worst thing he's ever done. Like in a vacuum, the comments about Jesse were fine. And I don't really have a problem with what he said about Jesse. My problem is more that if you're going to call out a player after that loss, Jesse's the last player I would call out. And whether he actually called him out or not, he's the player that he sort of singled out and discussed his game in length and said he needs to get better and he's not stronger and sort of poked at. And he talked about his free throw shooting. I'm just sitting there thinking, say something about Jimmy, say something about Joe. And he did say little things about Joe, but to me, Jesse has been the one bright spot, and he's gotten the most flack in post-game pressers. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe he does that for a reason, but it just feels like he's the last guy that should be getting flack in the post-game.
Listen, there's nothing wrong with calling out a player. All right, let's start there. There's nothing wrong with calling out a player. In fact, for him to say, I've never called out a player, and if that were to be true, I'd say that's a problem. Like, I think there is a merit to calling guys out when they're not playing well. Jesse's played fantastic this season.
Yeah, but I think the argument, and I'm not totally against you. I just think maybe it's better to not do it in a post-game press conference, and that's just never been his style.
Well, for someone who is struggled, I'm trying to think of a historical example, but let's look at someone like Caleb Joseph from a couple years ago. Like Caleb Joseph really struggled. All right, if Jim wanted to go call him out, I'm fine with that. You want to light a fire under his ass? All right, fine. Go for it. Jesse's the last guy that needs that right now. All right. Him and Buddy, like they're doing the best that they can to try to will this team to some victories. There are other areas that you can attack on this team that maybe need the fire lit under them a little bit more. Jesse, to me, and listen, if you want to call him out in practice, go for it. All right. But to hash this kid out in front, and again, like you said, I don't think it's made out as bad as some people maybe. Like I've seen a bunch, like our guy Jake Marsha and the Barstool Bench Mob, like they have a full ass graphic of Jim Boeheim's quote. I was like, all right, like that seems a little excessive. If you want to tweet out the quote, like okay, but I don't think that it's graphic worthy, right? It wasn't that bad.
No, it really was fine. It's just it was a last straw thing. I feel like it was. We joke about it on this podcast all year that Jesse's getting the treatment of Jesse's just not really in it at the start, and he's not talking about the other players. And then he went out and did it after Jesse played fine, and Cole was terrible, Joe was terrible, Jimmy was bad. I mean, everyone was bad, but Buddy, and you could even say he wasn't even that good, even though he scored 25 points.
Right. And it's just one of those things where there are other places to point blame. Like we talk about it on this show a decent amount. Like, you want to get mad at Buddy, or you want to get mad at this team, you shouldn't be pointing the finger at Buddy Boeheim right now. I mean, his offense is kind of willing you to some wins at times. So if you want to direct blame,
funny,
look
not
somewhere
to cut
else.
You off, but just made me think in the Boeheim show last night, someone asked about Buddy, and he said, I'll talk about Buddy. He's top 5 in the scoring in the league. And then he said something really funny where he was like, I'm just happy he's not scoring 12 a game because they maybe want to shoot him in this town. Like, imagine if he was scoring way less, because it is true. It's like Buddy's not the guy to pick on. Is Buddy getting more open shots? And Jim Boeheim even said that to his credit. He said, is he getting more shots than maybe he would somewhere else? Or like, I don't know if he said exactly that, but he said Is he taking a lot of shots for us? Yes, but he's also doing it because no one else can do it on this
that's
team.
The thing
and
is
that's why.
You can say Buddy Boeheim needs to dial it back. Who do you want taking those extra 3 to 5 shots? Who do you want taking them? Like, seriously, a contested Buddy jumper is still a better look than some of these other guys taking some of these shots. And at the end of the day, at the end of the day, I'm cool with Buddy getting his right now.
Yeah, me too. All right, well, let's dive into this weight game some. We will kick it over to our guy, Anthony Dabbundo, for Dabbundo's Digits.
The numbers you need to know. Anthony Dabbundo breaks down the biggest stats for this week's Syracuse matchup. Everybody! Dabbundo's Digits. If you ain't taking stats, kick the out the class. On the Locked On Syracuse Podcast.
Where you at? Let's go! We spent all year rightfully discussing why Cuse is terrible, but let's go more into the stats about what they do well and what they don't. The Orange's offense is based almost entirely around ball screens and isolation. Syracuse is 14th in the nation in ball screen usage, 90th offensively in generating good looks off of them. They're 3rd in isolation rate, and they rank just 177th in quality of shots produced on isolation looks. It's not really been a great avenue for offense, and a great sign that guys like Girard and Buddy have relied so much on creating shots for themselves. It's a classic sign they're missing a true point guard like Kadari Richmond. The offense was actually more efficient with Kadari in the game last year, in part because of his ability to generate open looks for others. They're just not quite getting those this year. Syracuse has elite spacing. They don't turn the ball over much. That's why the offense is still pretty good. But if you're wondering why the Orange aren't shooting as well as maybe some anticipated at the beginning of the season, look no further than the lack of open threes taken. Syracuse has a lower open three rate this year than it did in each of the last 2 seasons, and it's hard to be a lights-out jump shooting team unless you can consistently get really good looks from deep. If you disagree, go watch Davidson or Colorado State run offense. You'll see how many open threes they get from deep. Then you'll realize Syracuse is taking tough shots because they can't generate open ones against set defenses. The Orange's best spot-up catch-and-shoot jump shooter has actually been Joe Girard, statistically, which furthers the point he'd benefit so much from being able to play off the ball more, but it's not a luxury he has this year given the guard situation, and especially now without Symir Torrance as being out to injury. Cole Swider ranks 2nd best in three-point shooting on spot-up catch-and-shoot looks. One major reason for a huge uptick in the isolation frequency has come from Jimmy Boeheim, who the advanced metrics really dislike this year. Some of the worst shots Syracuse takes are when he's isolated in the mid-range or when he's isolated on drives to the rim. Joe Girard takes ISO mid-range pull-up jumpers. The numbers don't love those either. Syracuse has so much shooting talent, they'd be better off to not take these shots with the frequency that they do, yet they keep coming. But that's enough offense. Let's go to the defense. The profile of a heavy zone team is statistically evident in the numbers. They allow a lot of open threes. They don't allow mid-range looks. They don't allow drives to the rim. They don't allow post-ups. But they can be vulnerable to cuts to the rim. The biggest red flag, though, is the open three number. I told you guys this earlier this year. The lacking athleticism means that the Orange are outside the top 200 in defending catch-and-shoot threes, off-the-dribble threes, and rank bottom 50 in open three rate allowed. They actually haven't been punished as much as they could have been this year. There is still room for this three-point defense to fall. According to Evan Maya's defensive Bayesian performance minutes, Jimmy Boeheim has been the worst starting defender in the entire ACC this season. That's a major issue. Wake Forest, LaRavia, and Williams both rank in the top 10 in the league net efficiency overall. Will probably be the 2 best two-way players on Saturday. Buddy Boeheim still has the number 1 offensive rating in the league according to his rankings. On Syracuse, according to his rankings. And it feels like there's been a lot of runs in Cuse games this year. Well, there have been. The Orange are 4th in the ACC in number of scoring runs per game, but 4th worst in scoring runs conceded per game. It's been a true wave of volatility, and it's been really painful to ride during some of these games. And I'm generally skeptical of this Wake Forest team. They're clearly improved, but close game luck and variance suggest that these actual records of these teams should be closer than they currently are. Look no further than the first meeting at Wake Forest when Syracuse should have won. All 3 major prediction metrics I look at, from Bart Torvik to shot quality to good old Ken Pom, actually favor the Orange to be within a point or 2, maybe even 1 point, according to Bart Torvik. So ever so slightly an underdog at home. Shot quality thinks they should be favored. So while I think everybody and the whole fan base is out on this Syracuse team, it might be a good buy low opportunity. The problem, of course, they only have 5 players that are available that Jim's willing to play. I think the Orange might just get right here if they have a good shooting night.
All right, thanks to Anthony Dabbundo, as always. Did a deep dive there on the Syracuse season so far. We always appreciate his work, and we want to tell you guys that because it is the new year, many of you are doing New Year's resolutions about getting fit or eating healthier, so make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good. You want to eat it unlike other protein bars, which can be chalky or waxy or taste like a chemical spill. You want to eat healthy, but it gets boring sometimes. And by like week 3, you might be thinking this is just not worth it. We're kind of in that range now of week 3 of New Year's resolutions, maybe even week 4 for some of you. And you might be thinking, man, where's the chocolate? Well, Built Bar is your answer. It's covered in 100% real chocolate, and the bars are somehow good for you. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, so time for the prop shop, and we will discuss Wake a little bit and make our picks for the game as well. But we always got to sneak in the prop shop. And a little update, taking a big lead on you, Ty, after last week.
I suck. Well, I beat you in football, right? Did I beat you in football, or did you beat me?
You did. You crushed me in football. Okay. So I mean,
suck at this.
This game's mostly luck anyway, if we're being honest. But I'll take the credit if you want to give it my way. I'm 50-53. I'm still down in terms of record, but plus 340. Went 5-1 last game against Pitt. And Ty, you are 45-58. Right now, went 2-4 in the last game against Pittsburgh. So we start out with the Benny Williams prop, and I think this is especially noteworthy because Jim Boeheim, another thing he said during his coach's show hours there was that Benny had his best practice of the season probably, and he's starting to get it maybe, and talked about how he just needs to rebound, and he's 6'9", 220, and they can't really get him to rebound like they thought they were, but he's finally starting to get it, maybe. So over under for his minutes in this game, 7.5 minutes. I'm going to ride Jim Boeheim's optimism. I'm going to say, based on the flack that he got throughout the week, based on the good practice, that it's all set up for like a 12, 15-minute performance from Benny.
Well, I think if it's not the over here, then there's a real issue. Like, he needs to be playing. He needs to be playing. And you talked about this with Devo on the Scores Table podcast. Like, this kid needs to be given the tools to A, be happy, and B, thrive and develop. He's not going to do that sitting on the bench, especially on a bad team. So if this isn't an over of 7.5, like, you're right, this should be a 15-20. You know, my wish is he's getting 25-30, because at this point in the season, you have to do that.
Yeah. And it does seem like Boeheim's confident he's coming back, but we'll see. You got to keep him happy for the rest of the season, and we've talked about that a lot. Next up, who will lead Syracuse in scoring in this game? Buddy minus 135 continued to increase his odds because he's the only one in double figures last game when he scored 25. Gerard plus 290, Jimmy plus 290, Swider's dropping to plus 475, Jesse plus 495, and if you want to go for an other, you can go for plus 1,000. I'll just take Buddy. I mean, I know it's minus 135, but I don't have it in front of me. I maybe should go back and look at how many of these games he's actually led, but it feels like 8 out of the last 10 or something like that have been Buddy leading the team in scoring.
Yeah, I guess you're something close to that, certainly in the neighborhood there. By the way, looking back at the last game between these two teams, Benny played 24 minutes in that game. I believe that was as high in the ACC. Granted, it did go to overtime. But anyway, getting back to who will lead, I'm just going to tell you here, man. Like, I'll take Buddy. I think he can get his. It's at home. He's a great shooter inside the dome as well. So I'll ride the hot hand. I should just stop beating myself. And it's because I try to get cute with the high score and take Joe and take Cole, and every once in a while I'll take Jesse's. Like, I'm going to stop getting cute. I'm going to lay the juice, take Buddy.
So Buddy's definitely not leading the team in scoring.
Yeah. No, I just
gonna work.
Jinxed that, but
yeah. Well, maybe Giannis can get out there and make a couple shots. I guess we should have thrown in a Giannis prop, but we know that they're going to go to him probably at the Open. I mean, right off the bat, he's going to be
stars in the building.
Out of every break, I guarantee out of the first break, it'll be a shot of him. And How about an NBA champion next? Like it's,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
They'll have
cool
like
with
an
it
NBA
because
promo that they have to do, and yeah.
oh yeah, that's a good point too. So he's going to be a featured part. I don't even know what the prop would be. Over
I
under
love that people
20
are
times.
outraged about this. Like, why is Weitzman wasting his time and money on this? It's just like, listen, he's a grown ass man. He can bring whoever the hell he wants to a game. Like, let him bring Giannis. Like, I don't care. Listen, I'm not saying this is some great prop for recruiting or whatever, but like, let him bring whoever he wants. I'm very indifferent on this, on it. A, making an impact, and B, it being a weird or bad thing. I just think I'm indifferent.
Yeah, I hope it's not a bad crowd when he's there. It's just sort of sad that of all the games to be there, this is like the lowest sort of intrigue for a home game we've had in forever. But all right, let's get into picking the game. Ken Pom projects Wake to win 79-76 in a high-scoring game. That puts the over-under at 155. We do not have our line from our friends at BetOnline.ag yet, but we'll pick it on that Ken Pom -3 number for Wake, so Syracuse +3. I think this is a win for Syracuse, which is weird to say because Wake is a much better team, but it feels like Wake is due for a loss, and they're on a winning streak that's due to be snapped soon, and Syracuse is due for a win. And I've said that a lot this year, but after all the flack this week, it's just sort of sizing up for a get-right game at home. I don't think it means anything. I don't think it means they're going on a run or something, and I'm not overly confident in it. But if I had to pick, considering Syracuse gets some points, I think I'll take Syracuse with the +3 on the Ken Pom number.
I'll take Wake in this one. I don't know. I mean, I just think it's a hot team versus a team that's really reeling right now. Really. And spot-wise, does it make sense for Syracuse? Yeah, certainly does. Home after a little bit of time. But this is a Wake team that played on Monday, has had some time off. It's tough to pick against them because they've played really well. They're 7-3 in the ACC right now. So I'm going to ride with Wake. I mean, they're playing like a really good basketball team. And let's remember this too. I think the message in that Wake locker room is this ACC is bad. You have to pick up these wins. I mean, I don't know if you saw this the other day, but CBS and during the Indiana-Michigan game, they're going through Indiana's tournament resume. Syracuse was a bad loss.
I know.
That was marked down as a bad loss on Indiana's tournament resume. So I think that's something that you post in that locker room for Wake and say, look, you lose, this is going on the bad loss ledger for your tournament resume. And Wake's not a team that's guaranteed anything just because of how bad the ACC is.
Yeah, and a couple notes. I know Syracuse, you can make the case, man, they should have won that game at Wake. Well, since then, Wake has only lost to Duke in the game after that. Then they rattled off 4 straight wins. In their last 3 wins, they've averaged a margin of victory of 22 points in conference.
They're scoring north of 80 in all of them.
Yeah, I mean, they're rolling right now. The other thing is, Syracuse, when they played them, they were down Davion Williamson, who's a starter due to COVID protocols, and they've also added back a rotation piece as well. So you're talking about Wake plus 2 rotation pieces and a better team right now that's rolling. My whole case is that it just doesn't really make sense. Like, they're going to trend in the opposite direction just in time for the Syracuse game. I'm not overly confident in it. I just feel like it's more so that after all the flack this week and after all the talk about the program, it'd be kind of fitting if they won at home here against a decent team and sort of got a win that they're due to get. But look, Wake is a lot better than Syracuse right now. And it's funny because when we did the sort of projecting the ACC schedule at the start of the year, we thought, oh, you got 2 against Wake, you got 2 against Miami. That could be 4 wins.
Pitt.
And
2 against BC,
yeah, I mean, 2 against BC and 2 against Pitt is still a pretty good draw, obviously, and we've already gone through the 2 against Pitt, 2 left against BC in mid-February. But the 2 against Miami and the 2 against Wake, you thought that was going to be like 10-11 or 10-13 in the conference going in, and they're pretty much 1-2 or 2-3 right now in terms of the standings, which is crazy.
Yeah, no, it's certainly flipped in terms of the ACC. The teams you thought that were going to be good are not. Teams that you thought were going to be bad, for the most part, are not. And that's where we're at right now. In terms of the total here, I'm going to go under. They hit 151 the last time they played with an overtime. I think that, and usually when you see the second time around of these games, it goes a little bit lower. So I'll take the under on this one.
All right, I'm going to ride with the over. I think the offense bounces back at home, and it should be an up and down fun game. I hope it's a good game for Giannis's sake and for anyone that's going, because we're kind of due for just a game that's not like gouge your eyeballs out afterwards. And I don't know, Wake is usually a pretty fun team to go up against, and they've been pretty up and down this year. So I'll take the over. I'm on Syracuse to win, actually, and to cover. You're on Wake right now, and we'll see how it goes. That's our prop shop picks for this week and our preview podcast. Thanks to Anthony Dabbundo. You can follow him at Anthony Dabbundo on Twitter. And we will be back on Monday to rehash anything that comes out from this game. Hopefully not more frustration, but you never know the way the season is going. So have a good weekend.